How's it? This is Mundo and welcome to the Working Guitarist. So I just did a session. I'm going to try to share it with you the best I can. And I thought since I did a session I could show you what goes on in here, talk about my studio, talk about working with a composer, talk about working with an engineer. And I got to say studio work is the most favorite thing I do. And it's pretty cool, especially like today's session when they came to my studio. And I had all my guitars here, and I have all my amps and all my effects, so it worked out really good. First, let's talk about the studio. I actually had to name it Kahale Ilio, which means the doghouse. And the reason I had to name it is I started doing professional work here. And when you're making an invoice, you can't say the work was done in my extra bedroom. So this is my house. My studio is Kahale Ilio. And I've done CDs here. I've done all kinds of gigs, track dates, soundtrack dates. So I'm going to show you my studio really quickly. I use Logic, the current version of Logic on my computer. It's not up now. I have two good monitors that I really like. A good reference when you go shopping for them is get your favorite CD and also take a classical CD and be able to play it, or MP3, play it through those speakers, and you know what your favorite CD sounds like, and it'll be able to speak to you that way. With the classical thing, you want to hear if you can hear every instrument, and that really helps me. I use an Apogee Duet. I'd love to have more. Right now I use a Duet, and if you notice I got rid of whatever two preamps I had. I had two preamps. They were noisy, and I gotta say the Duet sounds so good that I started using plugins. So I use plugins with Logic, and the plugins help me get that two preamp sound. In the future I will get some two preamps, but right now that's what we're working with. When I plug my guitar in, it goes into this radio JDV. You'll notice I just plug in my guitar here, and then I got an XLR that goes straight into the computer. That will give me an just nice clean signal, and then I can add like guitar rig or something to that. Then the other line goes down to my pedal board, my spaghetti pedal board, and you'll notice go through a tuner, and I have a bunch of effects. This is kind of set up for today's session, which is basically a progressive rock session. So from my pedal board, today's amp, I go into the Rando RD45, and loving this thing, and cranked up the gain today. And from the amp, I go to an isolation box, and in here, it's kind of dark, but in my isolation box, I have Rando 112 cab, and then I'm using a Shure KSM 313, I think. It's a red ribbon mic. And in the future, I will be upgrading my interface and getting two mics in there, and I'll always keep the dry signal. One thing about the dry signal, if I'm doing a session for other people and I know they're going to want a guitar rig kind of plug-in thing, I will use this Rando right down here. And let's say I use this Rando with this XTC, and some Marshall Plexi in there now. I can scream a sound out of here, so it sounds great. All the effects in the world. I don't know what the producers want, but then what they're only going to hear is the completely dry signal from this radio JDV. So then they can take it and use a guitar rig, or bring me into the studio and I can tweak it the way they want. I do a lot of sessions that way. One last thing about my studio, I gotta say it was the most unsexiest purchase. I didn't want to do it, but it was the best purchase, and that was getting acoustic sound panels for my studio. So before, I've always been able to get a good guitar sound in this studio, but if I wanted to mix it or master it or go anywhere else, I'd have to take it somewhere else, because this room didn't sound good. And I started actually learning how the room sounded, which was a detriment to the music, because then that's what I thought music sounded like. So I talked to the people at GK Acoustics, and one thing they insisted on, and I didn't think I needed it, was these bass traps in the back here. So I got bass traps, and they made a big difference. And then one last thing, if you notice over here, I have a bookshelf, and one thing about the bookshelf is it also helps refract sound, and we've done vocal sessions into there because it works great. We can move the books around, and we get a great sound. One last thing, what's the most important part of your studio? All right, I think it was Steve Vai who said it's your chair. And I've spent a lot of money on this chair because you're going to spend hours in it. You notice I've taken the right arm off so my guitar can hang. But he's right, you spend hours in this chair, why not be comfortable? And then the other thing I heard that was the most important thing in a studio was your screen. And the bigger the screen, the better, because you're in it all day long. Sometimes I've had 2 screens going. You're in it all day long. So if that's a tip, I hope you can run with it. Until next time, this is Mundo. Aloha.